Welcome everyone. My name is Angie Peacock. I'm a psychiatric drug withdrawal consultant and a healing coach. If you are watching this from Facebook, please like the post or the page. If you're on YouTube later, please hit subscribe and like or comment. And I try to answer every comment that I see. Today we are being joined by Mark Horowitz, and I have been wanting to talk to him for years because we run in the same circle and we work with the same people just from different angles. So I'm so excited to bring you Dr. Mark Horowitz today. Mark, welcome.
Nice to be here. Good to talk to you finally, Angie.
Yeah. And we have lots to get to. Oh my gosh. So I'm gonna just jump right in. Okay, Mark, can you tell us what got you interested in psychiatry in particular, and what has your experience been learning about this topic?
Sure. Shall I just introduce myself to people who don't maybe know me?
Yeah.
So
right here.
My name is Mark Horowitz. I'm a training psychiatrist, and I work as a clinical research fellow in the National Health Service in London, although I'm originally from Australia. And I did a PhD in how antidepressants work at King's College London, and I've done a lot of writing about how to safely stop antidepressants and other psychiatric drugs. And I now run a clinic in the National Health Service in my trust, to be able to stop antidepressants and benzodiazepines and drugs like that, which we're trying to expand. And I also offer academic consulting to people who contact me from outside of England on how to safely stop their drugs. So how did I get into this line of work? So how did I become interested in psychiatry? I guess that's a long time ago. I guess for the same reason that everybody gets interested in it, because I wanted to fix my fucked up family and my fucked up younger self.
Same. I've only seen one person deny that on Twitter somewhere. No, that's not why I got interested in this. I'm like, okay, I don't believe you, but all right.
Maybe there are less self-focused people out there than me. But I come from a very neurotic Jewish family. If you've ever watched a Woody Allen film and you've seen people shouting at each other whilst eating, whilst whatever, that's my family. It's quite mad. Psychiatry has not helped me to solve it at all. It's made it worse.
Yes.
Anyway, I learned that the hard way. And how did I get interested in deprescribing? So basically, I pursued a career in psychiatry. I went to medical school in Sydney. I started my training as a psychiatry registrar in Sydney, and I thought that the treatments in this field aren't effective enough. We need to find out why they work, why they don't work, how to make them better. And I moved to London to do a PhD in how do antidepressants work and what is the biology of depression. I guess I thought very much about the biopsychosocial model. I was interested in stress hormones. I was listening to Robert Sapolsky. And then towards the end of my PhD, I came across an article talking about withdrawal effects from antidepressants. And that was very startling to me, because at that point, I'd been on an antidepressant for 15 years. I was a miserable 21-year-old for a variety of reasons. I didn't like medical school very much. I was a frustrated, writer, scientist, and I couldn't stand memorizing things. And I had about a 5-year existential dilemma, talking about quitting it every day, on top of a whole lot of things from family, childhood. And I went to see a doctor and got given an antidepressant. So I was taking an antidepressant from third year medical school. And so by the time I read this article about withdrawal effects, I'd been on the drugs for 15 years. And I sort of had in the back of my mind, maybe I should come off my antidepressant, partially because I'd had a lot of health problems over that period of time. I had severe problems with daytime tiredness, memory and concentration issues.
Mm-hmm.
I had at one point in my life had a brilliant memory. I considered it, one of my special talents. And as the years went on, my memory was terrible. Right, I couldn't remember patients. I couldn't remember what I'd learned. I sort of went from being, very good in the class to being near the dunce. and I was tired all the time, and I went to doctors because I came from a very, I mean, that's another element to things. I came from a very medical family, so medications were a very big part of our world. My mum was a pharmacist, and there was a drug, to treat every ailment. So that was definitely, I came from a highly medicalized, pharmaceuticalized family. So I went to see doctors, and I attracted various diagnoses, including chronic fatigue syndrome, and eventually narcolepsy was the diagnosis that stuck. And so I was told the reason why I'm having all these sleeping problems and memory and concentration issues is because of narcolepsy. That led to more medications, stimulants, and then sleeping drugs. And I had this spreadsheet of, if I take a bit more sleeping drug and a bit less stimulant, can I manage being anxious and tired? And basically, for about 10 or 15 years, there was no whatever magical concoction that worked, and I was a walking human burette full of different drugs. And I sort of landed at the end of my PhD, I thought maybe I should come off this antidepressant. Maybe it's part of what's causing these problems. And I've told the story a few times. I looked up all the academic literature about how to come off the drugs, and they all said come off in 4 weeks, mild and self-limited problems with withdrawal. I looked up Google, and I found a very different story. I found surviving antidepressants early on, saying people have huge trouble coming off these drugs. It can take months and years. And I guess as a fairly institutionalized person, as someone who spent my entire life in academic halls doing degrees and jumping through exam hoops, I sort of didn't know who to trust. I sort of thought, people on the internet, they have valid experiences. That does sound a bit worrying, but I'm so used to following what professor says. So I sort of split the difference, went halfway, and I came off over 4 months, and I ended up in a world of pain. I wake up feeling absolute terror, like I was being chased by a wild animal. I had basically panic attacks that lasted for 12 hours of the day. I get a bit of relief in the evenings. I took up running, and I ran until my feet bled because it gave me a little bit of reprieve. And a few weeks into that, I thought, I can't keep living like this. And basically, I ended up moving back from London, where I was living at the time, to Sydney in Australia, where I basically crumpled as a theoretically fully grown man in my 30s on my parents' floor like a small child weeping. I went back on the drugs, which actually relieved a lot of the agitation and terror that I had over a few weeks. Put it back in my mind for a couple of years, and for a variety of reasons, actually ended up seeing more doctors, getting more medications to treat narcolepsy. Ended up on 5 psychiatric drugs at the peak of my psychiatric career, although it was sort of prescribed by a combination of sleep specialists and psychiatrists. So it wasn't completely for mental health reasons, but I ended up being on 2 antidepressants, Lexapro and Remeron or mirtazapine, Ritalin, Zopiclone, and a drug that they give for narcolepsy called gamma hydroxybutyrate, which is known as the brand name Xyrem, which is supposed to put you into a deep sleep. It's also known on the streets as grievous bodily harm, a party drug and a date rape drug. Part of the reason why it's a date rape drug is because it puts you into a deep sleep. So I was a very complicated chemical concoction.
Up in the morning and down at night, and riding a roller coaster every day. Yeah.
So Xyrem is a funny thing. You've got to wake up in the middle of the night to take a second dose. So you have to have an alarm. So anyway, anyway, that was a strange period of my life. That was I guess I was somewhat of a hardcore drug user, but all prescribed by doctors. In any case, I basically about 5 years ago, I decided to, after basically being almost non-functional, I was walking around the hospital with a piece of paper trying to remember who I'd just seen. If I lost it, I had no idea. I felt completely embarrassed about how absent I was. And I was starting to think that it's becoming unethical for me to be a doctor because I'm just so absent. And so I took a leave of absence from my work, which I haven't gone back to in Australia. And I decided this time that the experts in this field were clearly people on surviving antidepressants. And I took their advice and I came off my drugs slowly. And I've done that over the last 5 years. And I'm now at the, not quite the tail end, but the last stage, I hope, of coming off my drugs. So I actually, in 14 days, I will be off escitalopram or Lexapro, which is a drug I've been on for 20 years. So that's a big moment in my life.
Amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thanks, Angie. I've been microtapering that the last while, and I'm down to the tiniest last 0.02 milligrams of a drug now, of the drug now, and I'm down to the last 0.9 milligrams of mirtazapine or Remeron, which is a bit more. I'm not sure how long that will take me. Hopefully, the next few months. I'm hoping that by summer this year, I might be off my medications, which I'm looking forward to a lot. And so, I guess that's how I came around to deprescribing, through first-hand experience, and I spent a lot of time reading about it and writing about it and trying to do bits of research in it. And that's what I do in my clinical practice now, is mostly deprescribing or doing research and advocacy around it.
Amazing. So can you share some of your research? I often refer to your research as, to me, the only thing that's proven what the layperson community has found, that people have to taper very slowly and it should be patient directed. So can you talk a little bit about all the research you've done in this area, and maybe any surprising findings that you found or any pushback that you've received?
Right. I mean, so, in terms of tangible, practical research, we haven't done very much except for surveys, because we've tried to get studies funded to compare hyperbolic tapering with linear tapering, which hasn't been funded so far, although we haven't quite given up. Although that's not true. There's a study happening in Australia where they are testing hyperbolic tapering versus care as usual, which is probably the most interesting piece of research happening at the moment. So in terms of what I've done, I mean, I've basically turned a lot of what I've learned on online forums, I've translated into the academic literature. I mean, so the main thing that I focused on is the relationship between the dose of a drug and its effect on the brain. At the risk of maybe boring people to tears, should I share a slide or something for a second?
That's a great idea. Yeah, let me make you the host so that it'll let you share. I often show the hyperbolic taper, so go for it. I'm a visual person too. Okay.
Let me see. So let me just share my screen very briefly. I guess it'll summarize things. Sorry, excuse my very messy.
It's beautiful. It's like mine.
Sorry, it's a disaster. Do I have this? Okay. Does this have it? Yeah. Okay. So possibly people have seen these kind of things before, but I'll do it. So basically, the important bit is, it's not studies that I did, but it's studies that have been done about 15 years ago at Harvard. This shows the dose of an antidepressant and its effect on the brain. It happens to be on the serotonin transporters. And this sort of study was done by putting radioactive dyes into people's veins, which goes into their brains. So you can see how much these receptors are occupied by the drug when you're on different doses. And so you can see doses down on the bottom here, and effect on the brain is here. And the key aspect of this is it's not a straight line, so doubling the dose doesn't double the effect. This is called a hyperbola, which you might remember from high school. And it's sort of an example of a law of diminishing returns. When there's not much drug about in the system, every extra milligram of drug has a lot of receptors to attach to, sort of like in musical chairs. When you start off, there's lots of chairs available to sit down on. It's an easy game. As there's more and more drug in the system, more and more of the receptors are occupied by drug. So every extra milligram of drug has less and less effects, like at the end of musical chairs where most of the chairs are taken away. And what this means is, so the most common doses of citalopram being used out there is 20 milligrams and 40 milligrams. But a tiny, tiny dose like 5 milligrams, much smaller than the smallest tablet available, actually has about 3/4 of the effect of those very high doses. In fact, 3/4 of the effect of about 60 milligrams. And that tells us something about what happens when you try to come off the drugs. So a lot of doctors will say, all right, let's come off carefully. We'll come off in, say, 4 steps. We'll go down from 20 to 15 to 10 to 5 to 0. And intuitively, that makes sense.